everybody. You're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
And I'm Steve Morey.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in. And we are thrilled to welcome back to the show writer and artist Steve Bryant. Steve has been on the show in the past to discuss his creations, Athena Voltaire and The Catch. And he is back here to discuss a new Kickstarter for Athena Voltaire and the Terror on the Orient Express. Steve is an Eisner, Manning, and Harvey Award-nominated creator. Athena Voltaire previously had a home at Action Lab Entertainment, and that particular imprint that Steve also was the writer and co-creator of Ghoul Scouts. Other comic projects, again, as I mentioned before, The Catch, and also the new webcomic Maximus Wrecks. He has also completed projects for Dark Horse Comics, IDW, Boom, Ape Entertainment, and others, as well as extensive work in the role-playing and board game industry. Steve is also on faculty at Illinois State teaching digital painting, and we'll probably hear all about that. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me. It sounds really impressive when you read it, but when you live it, it's just nothing.
Okay, Steve, so we are not going to go through the pleasantries because we put you through that before about how you got into comics. So we can just go right down to the nitty gritty here. For people who are unfamiliar with Athena Voltaire, what is the Reader's Digest high concept pitch that you have there regarding that character that you co-created?
1930s pulp adventure, Indiana Jones starring a woman pilot. You've got Nazis, ancient artifacts, mythical creatures, explosions, all that stuff. I'm out of practice. I haven't had a convention for over a year now.
Yeah. It looks like Brian is putting up the Kickstarter for that. So again, this is called The Terror on the Orient Express, and that's a very familiar train to literary folks. So why don't you tell us what's going on in the Kickstarter, the storyline there?
It picks up after the previous trade, The Golden Dawn. But it's also a good, starting place for new readers. But Athena is catching up with an old friend, and she thinks it's a pleasure train trip. And when bodies start to drop, she has to put on the guns and go back to work. And like as the name implies, it plays around with the murder mystery tropes a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it also has a lot in common with stuff like Alien or The Thing, these kind of claustrophobic monster stories. So it was fun because it was a bit of a departure, because usually, everything in the series is racing to avoid an apocalyptic event. But this time she's trapped on the train with the apocalyptic event. So, it was neat to kind of change it up.
Right. Now, full disclosure, I am a huge Athena Voltaire fan. I was going through and I'm like, there's this and this. Though the Ape Entertainment and Speakeasy issues are in my bunker, I have all the other single issues. I absolutely love this series. I think Warren Ellis said it best, talking about Athena Voltaire, is in the context of saying, what if the Mummy and Van Helsing were, actually good? And I was very happy you put that. And I would like to talk to you a little bit about this book that came out a few years ago, Athena Voltaire Pulp Tales.
Yes.
Yeah, so I am, though there isn't much out there in terms of comic book character prose, whenever I do see something like this, I gobble it up. And if you ever do a second one, I would love to do Athena Voltaire in Florida. In the late 1930s. Very good ideas on that one. But why don't you tell us?
Or Athena Voltaire in Florida, but in the 1970s, so she's kind of retired.
No. It's all right. Coral Castle filters into it. Early Mob. I got it. Yeah. Anyway, can you tell us a little bit, because I think this is testimony to how you can use this character in many different ways. What was the impetus for this, for the Pulp Tales?
It was back, when we were still at, I say we all the time. Mostly just me. But I've been fortunate. Chris Murrin has followed and done editor duties on everything I've done since Ape. So that's been really handy. but yeah, it was back during the days that the book was at Ape Entertainment, and I believe it was Ape co-publisher Brent Irwin suggested it. Doing hey, this is a pulpy character. Do a volume of pulp style stories, and as this stuff always plays out in my head, I look at it and go, "That's a great idea. That shouldn't take long." So years later, and in this instance, the delays were all due to me. But I had talked about it a little bit on the Comic Geek Speak message boards, and I got a message from Chris Murrin, and he said, "I would love to edit this project for you." Again, famous last words there, because Chris just had to, he had to corral people. He had to deal with the fact that while that book was going on, I was working on a soft reboot of Athena called The Volcano Goddess, when a different friend suggested, with you and Paul Daly going your separate ways, you could recut the existing comics and rescript them Marvel style. And again, I was like, oh, that shouldn't take long. So I made all these delays happen, long story short. But Chris edited that volume, and the editing of the volume took forever. But the cool thing was, as we were working on this project, we kept meeting people that were really talented writers that were like, oh, I'd love to write something for that. Among them, a pre-DC Tom King. And of course, by the time the book came out, Tom had eclipsed us all and was well beyond whatever we were doing. But it was really cool, because the idea was just reach out to a bunch of talented writer friends and have them do a take on the character. And this was around the time that I was thinking about the reboot, and I was thinking about trying to broaden what we were doing with the book, instead of just doing kind of Raiders riffs. And everything was on the table, from film noir elements to Cthulhu to screwball comedy elements. Because I think you and I have talked, Bill, before.
Oh yeah,
about loving the banter of the
in my head she's Rosalind Russell. In my head, yeah.
So that's perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so all of these things were kind of set off to these super talented writers, and we got back, I think, 17 just wonderful stories that hit all the different tones that I wanted to have in the comic series. But we were able to put it into a single book. And then I had gotten my start in the late 80s, early 90s, doing game design, illustrations for role-playing games. And so I was able to go back to being an illustrator and just do these full-page spot illos for the book. And that was a lot of fun. And it was kind of nice to, like I said, see how other people interpret the character and see what I could learn from it, really, to be quite honest. So yeah, I completely lost my train of thought, so feel free to play me off, start the music, and I'll
Well, no problem. I'm actually going to play myself off, because I'm worried I'm going to get into minutia. So I think it's best for me to take the interview baton, hand it off to Steve. Steve, what have you got for Steve?
Well, Steve, I have to say, I love your first name. I think it is fantastic. So you had mentioned really quickly, going back to your Kickstarter for the next volume of Athena Voltaire, that it's a great continuation. If you've been a fan, if you've been following the stories, the last one, Golden Dawn, from just a few years back. If you haven't read Athena Voltaire before, is there something that a brand new reader might need to know before stepping into the latest Orient Express adventure, or is it just are you just going to be just put full into this world and let the readers sort of work it out for themselves?
I think it's definitely the latter. And like one of the cool things, and I wanted to clarify something. We're still with Action Lab. We're just kickstarting this, and it's a chance for me to not have to buy books throughout the convention season. I'm kickstarting it so I can buy 2/3 of the print run. Lord knows how that's going to work with my laundry room, but we'll figure that out. But yeah, so it's kind of a way to facilitate that and facilitate coloring the book and stuff like that. But as far as this volume goes, it was originally planned as issues 9 through 12 of the ongoing series through Action Lab. There were some delays, and I always own up to it when it's my fault, but these delays were actually on the part of the publisher. But issue 9 was this kind of anthology issue where Athena and her love interest, Desmond Forsythe, are trying to get from an airstrip to the train station. And so while they're, having all these incidents in the car, she's telling him little stories about her backstory. So that actually kind of explains so much of the character that's the whole prologue just kind of works to bring new readers up to speed on all of her bizarre skill sets.
That's really, and that's actually really a cool just a cool technique there to kind of introduce right at the beginning and then throw you right into the action. Because that's one of my favorite parts about Athena Voltaire is that you can always count on some amazing action sets and just. So one of my other questions, and this is again sort of, I don't want you to give away too much of the plot, but I know you sometimes touch on some more supernatural elements. Obviously, there's some of the I'd say more centered adventures where were real world adventures where you've got Nazis and other nefarious human people. Is this one where you might touch a little bit more or lean a little bit more into the supernatural or to the otherworldly in this adventure?
Absolutely. And I don't think it's a spoiler. I mean, going back to the Kickstarter image, there's a big creature, in the montage. So no real spoilers there. It's a monster story.
I like how you did mention that there's something, elements of The Thing, elements of Alien, where, you are trapped in this, or Athena's trapped in this, basically this vehicle that she can't get off of. Well, I mean, you could, but you'd probably fall a long way off of one of those bridges. But that's a great setup for this. And I'm really excited for this. So after enjoying the last several books. So, but is this, so I know this is the latest adventure. Are you already thinking about the next one after this Kickstarter?
Actually, yes. I am deliriously excited about the next one. I don't know where the camera is on my iPad, so I feel like I'm looking all Peter Falk cross-eyed here. That's the
trench coat. Just get trench coat.
Myself, yeah.
As long as it's not Michelle Bachman, we're cool.
But yeah, with the Action Lab deal, I licensed the book to them for them to get other artists to draw it, and I would be writing it and doing the covers. And the whole idea behind that was I went back to school and finished my undergrad and finished grad school as well. I gotta mute my phone. I am so sorry. That's just pinging in the background. So yeah, I had done that, but I've been chomping at the bit to get back to writing and drawing. So I had 2 years worth of storylines planned out for the Action Lab stuff. And that was supposed to take me through grad school. We ended up getting 8 issues done. And then this will take us through year 1. But the cool thing is now I get to draw the next 3 arcs, which are
cool.
the next one. The working title is Athena Voltaire and the Devil's Sea. It's a South China Sea adventure. The one after that brings us back to Hollywood, which I'm excited about that because
there he is down this way. Yeah, that's
well.
Needless to say, my favorite prose story was Wolf Pfeiffer's, so I'm so excited about that.
He did such a great job. It was, I can't even pick a favorite story because while illustrating them, I got really just deeply involved in that. But yeah, I'm excited about the Hollywood stuff also because, I know LA Confidential takes place in the late 40s, early 50s, but I have a soft spot for those kinds of stories. Plus, we talk about indie as being in Athena's DNA, but the Rocketeer is too. And so being able to, kind of play around with some of that, I'm really excited about the Hollywood storyline. And it's a little bit also, I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, when we get to that, it's got like elements of the whole Hollywood Babylon storyline because we're dealing with, I shouldn't say storyline, but you know what I mean. But we're dealing with her romantic interest, Carter Charles, the matinee idol that she had met in Volcano Goddess. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's that one's kind of the noir Hollywood Lovecraft volume. So, yeah, I've gotten I had all these plotted, and originally Orient Express was going to be the second one because my structure was originally globetrotting adventure, change of pace, globetrotting, change of pace, and just kind of break through. That way, but Golden Dawn worked really well as a follow-up to Sorcerer Pope. So it kind of, I changed it as we went. Now, does everybody give you as circuitous of answers as I do?
Hey,
all over the map. I need
yeah.
I suppose I just like following your train of thought. Just like the Orient Express. There's a lot going on and you see a lot happening. So that's that's perfect. And that's great. I mean, I'm just, it excites me and I know it excites a lot of our viewers and our listeners too, when the creators is just so excited about, their character, their stories, just being, getting to put that out there. And so I'm really excited for this Kickstarter. And of course, I'm excited for what's coming after the Kickstarter too. So, yeah, thank you very much. And I'm going to pass it over to Brian because I know he was getting excited about a couple things there that we were talking about. So,
So I want to commend you for Maximus Wrecks. I had only ever read your Athena Voltaire stuff, obviously, or we've talked about that a lot. But I gorged on your Maximus Wrecks, which I will put up a picture from that here. It's hard to do double duty sometimes, but let me share that with our fans here because I feel like let me go back to the beginning. I don't want to spoil anything here. Come on. So I want to hear a little bit from you, kind of like the thought process and why you decided you wanted to tackle this, and then I want to get to sort of the way that it landed for now. And talk about sort of the world in between. So what was your starting point? Why did you decide I'm going to make a post-apocalyptic homage adventure webcomic?
For the longest time, I've loved as a child of the 80s or as a young adult of the 80s, depending on where we are in the timeline. I always liked so much of the pop culture of that period, and everywhere you looked, um, there were elements of post-apocalyptic fiction. Not just in the obvious ones like movies like Escape from New York, or even like Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, and stuff like that, but like right down to music videos. And it wasn't like one particular genre of music. You had Duran Duran with the all the stuff from Seven and the Ragged Tiger, and you had Crocus doing heavy metal post-apocalyptic videos, and everybody in between had those same aesthetics going on, and I was a sucker for that.
I just had to laugh because I know Bill is going off to retrieve that album. So for our viewers at home, spoiler alert.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I loved all of that stuff. So I knew I wanted to do a comic with that, and I wanted to make the shtick of it. I wanted to play totally with a straight face, but I wanted to embrace mullets and spandex, leopard skin spandex pants, and rollerblading ninjas. And I never got to the rollerblading ninjas, but I wanted to have all of those elements in it. And so it sat on the back burner in the back of my head for forever. And what happened was, in grad school, I had to do an independent study, and somehow I managed to convince them that a webcomic would be a good idea for my independent study. So, I started working with my advisor for it. It was fun because we started talking a little bit about nostalgia, and he pointed out, not in reference to the book, but the fine line between just regurgitating what was there and breaking new ground. And that got me thinking about some of the fiction that I was riffing on. Escape from New York is full of early 80s politics and stuff like that. And I thought it would be cool to do these trappings. The premise is the world ended in 1989. Welcome to the after party. And so that, allowed me to have mullets and all that stuff. But, excuse me, what if I were to incorporate contemporary concerns and start to move it forward there? And it just kind of snowballed. There were political thoughts that kind of seeped in, cameos.
I want to talk about that, and one of them is very timely. But before we get to that, Bill, did you succeed in your mission? Uh-oh, you're muted. There you go.
Yes, I did, and I was not something I was prepared for. But if you saw my ears, perk up when you said Crocus, I had to run and get my copy of the Crocus VHS of their video collection, which does have Screaming in the Night and Eat the Rich, which are the post-apocalyptic videos that the band did. So I did not anticipate running into the other room to get this, but I kind of had to after you mentioned that, Steve.
It's
We all
the fact
knew.
that the VHS, and you knew exactly where that VHS was.
It's impressive. I want everyone to realize how impressive the Bill's librarian and collector skills are together.
This has never been issued on DVD, so
Ooh,
if it ever
rare
does
too.
come out, I will be there.
Bring it back.
So if some dork from Rhino, if you're listening to this, you'll sell at least 2 copies here.
So you mentioned characters and political topics,
Yeah.
and I wanna talk about, and obviously you'll know what's coming here. Dutch Harbaugh, who I think you can all probably read between the pencil lines and inking lines that is loosely inspired. Well, no, okay, that is straight up Rush Limbaugh. And I actually remembered seeing your Facebook post that you were kind of like, yeah, and that happened. I mean, I don't want to misquote you. So how do you? I mean, obviously, I don't think there's a lot of love lost in this community for that person. But yeah, like what were you kind of working through there, writing him as the villain of the piece?
Well, I just feel that for over 3 decades, over a generation, this guy has been an active, divisive influence, in America. And, from pretty much any perspective, saying academia and the media, and I can't remember his 4 corners of deceit, but
Oh yeah,
all of these things, they are your enemy. Even talking to conservative Christians and saying liberals worship a different God than you. I mean, just any opportunity to be divisive, this guy took.
mm-hmm.
And that was kind of tapping into my righteous anger. No, it was tapping into my frustrations with the way things have been going in
Mm-hmm.
America. And yeah, he just, I felt like the manipulation of what is truth and stuff like that had encompassed any one politician even. And so it was easy to make him the main bad guy, but there are a few others that show up.
I love that. I mean, you're not trying to hide it, right? It's pretty on the page. But I also enjoy their comeuppance. Let's just say that without spoiling too much.
But the last page with Dutch was also kind of loosely based around. Did any of you guys watch the 80s TV series Wise Guy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The first story arc of the second season, which has the white supremacist guy played by Fred Dalton Thompson.
Yep.
Knox Pooley was the character's name, and at the end, when everything is breaking down, he's just casually saying, I'll just run this scam in another town, and that's kind of how I feel with some of these divisive talk radio people. Is I don't know how committed they are to their cause, and how much of it is just I can make a lot of money off of white fragility or whatever. So yeah, it was really cathartic. I mean, right down to his whole essential tagline that he brings up a couple times is "Bring America Back Again." #Baba. No hashtags in the book, obviously, because that would be anachronistic. But
I love that, and I love that you worked in his sort of acronym, which I'm not going to repeat for other people who are not liked as much, including the Glamazons.
But that was the actual acronym that he who Dutch is based on used.
Yeah.
And I that was like a really overt riff on him. There are a few things that are actually taken from some of his rants. I did some internet searches and I kind of applied it accordingly. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't have to worry about speaking ill of the dead because I finished that story arc while he was still alive. So
isn't that funny though? Because so that was a bizarre cosmic occurrence. I also want to talk, if you don't mind, about your inspiration for Lena. The Glamazons, obviously, and Lena specifically, were very important parts of the story for me as a gay man with a lot of transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer folk friends. So if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear more about the inspiration for Lena and that whole kind of angle.
I thank you. I would love to talk about this because, well, it's been difficult to try to figure out how to share about this, because I don't want to appear virtue signaling or, anything like that. But so we're in 2021, so May of 2019, my child, who was about to graduate high school, came to me and said they identify as female, and she had been raised gendered male prior to that, and her mom and I, would move heaven and earth for her. So I'm I'm grateful that she didn't have to deal with so many elements of difficulties from family, and coming into this, I don't mean to sound like the completely sheltered cishet white guy that I am, but I was in a weird place because I was working on the foundation of this strip with my advisor, and I had also, so I wanted to incorporate things that mattered to me, but I was also very conscious. Shortly after she began transitioning, Megs Visaggio wrote a really long Twitter thread about people trying to tell our stories, in her words. And I never want to, I don't want to co-opt something. I don't want to say, I don't know. I don't want to say this is my cause, because I am one degree of separation removed from it. But by the same token, when you look at like articles on something as innocuous as a TV sitcom like Modern Family coming on the air, and the span of time that it was on, 6 years, 7 years, I don't know, the difference in the perception of marriage equality of the American people from the beginning to the end was significantly different. And I had this, I want to have a better world for my kid. I want greater acceptance. And it was important to me, even though I didn't want to step on anyone's toes, to try and contribute to that without necessarily co-opting someone else's story. So I'm probably making this far more complicated than it should be. But yeah, I decided, I had this group that I wanted to do anyway, the Glamazons, because that is such a 1980s name. And I wish that I'd done more extreme stuff with like mohawks and stuff, but a weekly deadline, I couldn't get too crazy with the designs, because I was like, go. But I decided I wanted to make one of the Glamazons a transgender character, and as I thought of it more, it just seemed. And I hope this is apparent in the script, and I mean in the way that it plays out in the strip, and that I'm not spoiling where it's going. Excuse me, because I do want to return to it. But I thought it would be fun, and it would serve the idea of de-otherizing, because God knows we've had, everybody's turned into the other over the last 4 years. It would serve to kind of fulfill what I wanted to do in my small part of the world. I thought it would be fun to make her make her grow as the love interest for essentially, a Kurt Russell style lead character. And so that's kind of where it was going. And like I said, I use the word co-opt way too much for this, but I don't want to co-opt somebody else's story, but I do want to try to contribute and use my privilege since I can do this strip. But I also don't want to come off as the pretentious, I'm deigning to help a cause guy. So
I will say this as a cisgendered gay male, white male. I did not read that way. And your explanation in the last panel, last page 39, and your connection with your transgendered daughter, like you're not doing it exactly right. And your explanation here is so perfect because my boyfriend talks about this all the time. Like, we're both writers in some capacity. He's like full-time writer. That's what he does. We don't want to steal someone's story, right? We don't want to just write something that we don't understand. But at the same time, there is such a need for that content to tell stories, to de-otherize communities, that I think as long as you're doing your due diligence as a writer and a researcher and to understand and empathize, especially when you have a family member or someone close to you in that, like, you're doing it. I think from my humble perspective in this capacity, you're doing it exactly right. So I wanted to thank you
so much
for that, because I mean, that situation, I know for a fact that your daughter has an amazing support system. And that means the world to me as a young gay man, or as no longer young, but thinking back to when I was young. But no, it really is fun, and I love the idea that she might be the love interest. That's excellent. I'm so excited for more of the Maximus Wrecks story. I think everybody should realize it's a fun story. It's got a bit of a political satirism and other stuff, but it's fun and adventurous. So don't think you're going to be sitting down for a whole meal of heavy material. But I did actually. So just randomly, you were talking about Kurt Russell. I was getting a bit of a Garth Marenghi vibe. Are you a fan of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place at all? Have you heard of that?
It doesn't ring a bell. No.
I have to have you go look this up. I'll message you or Facebook or something.
Please.
It's this British thing. I know Steve's watched it. It just your representation of Maximus just triggered me to think about that. So anyway, whatever. That's my own association.
To tear down the curtain. I don't know. I do use photo reference to try to keep characters on model, and in part, that's because I suffer from aphantasia, which is I have no mind's eye. And I didn't learn about this until a couple of years ago either. When people say, I'm drawing this from memory, and they can like recreate a pose and stuff like that, or I just draw what I see in my head, I always thought that was a figure of speech. And I didn't realize people could actually do that, because I just see like a vague idea. And I have to scribble and work. And, in the past, before digital, I would draw like on one side of a piece of paper, turn it over like a vellum or tracing paper, turn it over, draw on the other side, go back and forth, and then, add in reference to try to make sure that it was consistent. So Rex is based on somebody, but yeah, it's not Kurt Russell. It's actually Timothy Oliphant. If you look at it.
Oh my gosh.
Timothy Oliphant with a mullet.
Justified is one of my favorite shows of all time. And oh my God, yes. That's awesome. I have bogarted this, I know. And I mean, but I think this was really good. I'm glad that you shared this. I think it's really special. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, the other thing to mention is my mom passed at the beginning of January, and my daughter was so afraid, and in her words, of giving grandma a heart attack, that she never came out to her. And so after she passed, since she didn't come out to her, she didn't come out to my side of the family. And so after my mom passed, and my brother and I are at the funeral home, I sent Lucy a quick text and said, how do you want to be named in the obit? Because we're talking with the guy right now. And she was like, oh my God, it would be rad if I could be Lucy and not dead named. And I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Heck yeah, I'm telling everybody. And I told my brother, and he was amazingly supportive. And he has 2 daughters, one of whom is an MD, and the other is a PhD in neuroscience. They were both amazing too. Everybody sent Lucy a text. Lucy, being 20, did not respond to these texts, but she got much love from everybody. But yeah, like I felt like, and I checked with her and said, can I, now that you're out with the family, can I talk about you? Because prior to it all, I would, post, my son and I did this, and I would, use the dead name and everything like that. And then after she came out, but it was still a secret from my family, it was the kiddo and I did this, and I'm with the kiddo. And I got really tired of using the word kid and kiddo. And, she was like, yeah, please, use this. So it was really cathartic to write about it at the end of Rex. And thank you for bringing it up, because I have not been able to talk about this, with anyone outside of my immediate circle. And yeah, it was a blast. So thank you for letting me share.
Steve, if you can't talk about it with these 3 mo's, I mean, I don't, come on. Brian, we do have at least one viewer question, which looks like a 2-part viewer question. Maybe if you could set something up for that. Oh, you already did. Oh. Okay, so we'll read this. This is from John Runyon, who has his own podcast, which is a really good show. We'll talk a little bit about that later. For Athena Voltaire, what was your favorite issue that you created, and what makes it stand out to you? And then on the other side of the coin, what was the most challenging issue? And from the creator's perspective, what made it challenging?
Boy, that's an excellent question. I'm not trying to cop out, but I think part of my favorite, I don't know if I have one particular favorite issue, but just the whole process of trying to tell a long form story. Because prior to this, it was doing a story arc, a 3-part miniseries or a 4-part miniseries for a trade. And the idea of having this threaded storyline with subplots has been a lot of fun. So I don't know. I finished lettering issue 10 the other day, the first actual part of the Orient Express storyline, and there's 2 subplots in there plus the main story, and each of the subplots are foreshadowing the next 2 volumes after this. So I'll say issue 10 is my favorite, because it was a chance, even though I didn't get to draw it, it was a chance as a writer to try and stretch out a little bit and do the challenging stuff that we all remember from the comics when we were kids, of multiple X-Men subplots, or the elf with the gun in the Defenders storylines, where you're like, what the hell is this about? When do I get my payoff? And being able to do that has been a lot of fun. So we'll say my favorite is issue 10, which is part of the Orient Express storyline. And then the other one was about what's the most challenging? Wrangling everything for
the most challenging issue. Yeah.
Wrangling everything for the compendium, because that was all reverse engineering. I took the original trades, and I I cut the spines up, and I literally taped pages onto blank pieces of computer paper and was cutting up, pages from the trade to arrange how I wanted the plot to go, and then scripting that on top of it and going, the characters look kind of close here. So that was probably the most challenging. And I think the first storyline in the compendium would be the most challenging. Brotherhood of Shambhala, just because it was the first time that I had started to put this together in that way, almost work in Marvel style, scripting after you have the art. But there's artwork in there from one of the webcomic storylines, plus the Flight of the Falcon storyline, plus the Free Comic Book Day short story. So it's like 3 different stories put into a hat and shaken up. So yeah, that was the toughest one.
Okay. If I can just put my vote in for favorite issue, I have to say it's the last issue of Sorcerer Pope, when we get the emergence of the Brazen Head and action all through the episode and a really cool ending. That's my favorite.
Oh, thank you.
For whatever that's worth.
Now, the guts of the Sorcerer Pope storyline, for a while I was going to do a book with a couple of people from the Comic Geek Speak forum, June Bob Kim and Molly McBride. And this was going to be an adventuress called Ursula Wilde. And I realized sometimes what's the food saying? Sometimes my eyes are bigger than my stomach. I don't have the capacity to write and draw everything that I want to do. And I was like, well, this would work really well as an Athena story. So I kind of folded it back in. I was going somewhere when I started saying that, but I lost it. But that issue was so much fun. And talking about the bigger storyline, that's where you've got the whole thing starting with her and Forsyth, where they each have their own agendas, but they have a relationship going on. And that was fun to explore. On the when I was writing the compendium stuff, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can write relationships, I don't know how to do that. But you get into it, you start thinking about the characters. That becomes the most fun, is writing the banter and the flirty dialogue.
Cool.
Sorry, really off topic again.
Not a problem.
Dialogue to me, especially when it comes to these kinds of these types of adventure stories that really bring back kind of memories of watching 1930s 1940s adventure and action films and stuff. The snappy, you can just kind of hear everything in a transatlantic accent where everybody's just talking way too fast and they're just so excited to get all the words out as fast as possible. Like I can feel it and hear it, when reading the dialogue between different characters. So I totally appreciate that.
Well, and I think it was last time I was on the show, or maybe the time before that, because I think last time I was talking about the cat.
Cat, yeah.
But the time before that, talking about when the light bulb went off for me with like screwball comedies, and realizing there's not a big difference between Bringing Up Baby and like Indy and Marion Ravenwood talking back and forth, and or Han Solo talking with Princess Leia, right? And once, I mean, sure, it's the transatlantic accent that you talked about, but once you remove that, it's still the rapid fire back and forth. That was revelatory for me. I was like, oh my gosh, it's all connected. It was fun.
Flirting wrapped in contempt, but done really well.
So, Steve, I got to tell you, probably the first project of yours that I've ever dragged my feet on was Maximus, because I'm a child of the 70s, and we had Planet of the Apes and Logan's Run and Arc 2 and Damnation Alley towards the end, Mad Max, and I can't stand most post-apocalyptic stuff. I'm so glad to hear that there's 80s reference. I think you know, the difference between 70s and 80s post-apocalyptic. The 80s folks there probably are a few libraries that survive, and they probably smell better. So I'm so happy to hear about what the reference points are in that.
Well,
I just want, go ahead.
I have to speak in defense of Logan's Run. That movie rocketed me into puberty.
Okay.
Are you serious?
No. But it was the first science fiction movie that I saw in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then, you know, at the time that the movie came out, I think like the first issue of the David Kraft, George Perez, Klaus Janson.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was obsessed with that movie for the longest time. And, you know, nobody was as jacked as George drew them, but, you know, it felt superhero-y kind of that movie.
Yeah. I mean, even the Sandman outfits are kind of, you know, almost S.H.I.E.L.D. At the time. Yeah. So it doesn't mean I didn't enjoy them, but there's something about post-apocalyptic that I just turned. Not that I didn't accept the book and record set from a friend of mine that she found in her basement. It's not so extreme as that, but
you just happen to have it at hand.
You know, and you know, and again with the music videos, I mean, there's a lot of them. You know, you mentioned Duran Duran. Tom Petty had like a series with that. Yeah, so it's there in a lot of it, and I'm definitely going to be checking that out. I wanted to ask you a little bit about being on faculty and teaching digital painting. Is that anything you did previously?
No. Well, like, gosh, I think it was about 8 years ago that I made the transition to inking digitally and penciling digitally. And it was revelatory. It was so cool because instead of like, for the longest time when I inked traditionally, no matter how I tried to loosen up, you know, I think about like the Frank Frazetta illustrations, ink illustrations from the 50s, and he's got this lush brush line that's just so gestural all over the place, and I could never pull that off. I could never do like the loose toth stuff. And working digitally, I found that I could, through the beauty of Undo, I could stab and dab with virtual ink much better than I could with traditional. So I could try to find the perfect spontaneous line by, you know, undoing 75 times. Eventually that spontaneous line through practice showed up, which is so contradictory, but I fell in love with working digitally. And when I went back to school, the degree is called Creative Technologies. And I always tell people it's like STEM, but for art. So you have musicians, it's an interdisciplinary program. So you have musicians and visual artists and graphic designers, you know, theater lighting designers, all kinds of people from disparate backgrounds that their main connections are some form of art and technology. And I took a digital painting class in there, and I had been intimidated by it for the longest time. And taking that class, I realized it was not as scary as I thought. And that became part of my focus with my degree, undergrad and later in grad school. And in grad school, as a GA, they asked me if, you know, they asked me if I could teach the digital painting class, even though I wasn't, you know, faculty yet. I did it as a GA, and the department head justified it by you know, my professional experience, and it was super gratifying. It was fantastic, and I realized the cool thing about teaching is it's like being at a convention and getting to talk about cool artwork with people that come up to your table. I mean, that's really what it is. And, you know, I'll I get to share, when I see a student working on a piece, I'm like, oh, well, this kind of reminds me of, this, and check out JC Linedecker for how to do folds, and calling up stuff on my iPad to show them, or them bringing in artists that they're excited about, that they're trying to emulate. And I get introduced to new people all the time as well. And yeah, it's been a real awesome opportunity to be able to teach in that program.
Awesome. Let me take that baton, give it back to Steve. Steve, what have you got for Steve to start rounding this off?
Well, I mean, I think we've talked quite a bit of what you're working on now, what you're looking forward to working on. How about just a random, thinky question? If you could work on something, anything out there, what would you like to work on? What comic series, what comic character would you like to take on? Can be one of the big two, can be anything else that strikes your fancy, could be something that hasn't been made into a comic book before. What are you interested in bringing into the graphic medium?
This comes as no surprise to anyone that's ever listened to me for 5 minutes. The pinnacle of the bucket list for me would be the Rocketeer. I have a Rocketeer Athena Voltaire crossover that I have plotted that I don't know who to pitch to, or just being able to do something with that character. Dave Stevens' work just really meant a lot to me, and the overt elements of the cheesecake and stuff. I think a lot of people overemphasize that, because I go back to those Frazetta brush lines that are wonderfully gestural, but Stevens would always contrast those with these really, he called them tickled brush lines. I read a few interviews where he used the tickled brush term, and it would be this really slick, sometimes dead weight holding line that would end in a kind of a cursive flare, and it was very almost machined, but it would be contrasted with this really just lavish, loose line. Boy, I'm alliterative like Stan Lee, but you would have this line that would just, yeah, it was so beautiful. So I do think, the Rocketeer and Indiana Jones are definitely my gateway drugs for getting into doing 30s stuff. But the Rocketeer would be number one. And number two would be Big Trouble. I did not say in Little China, because the most effective thing about Jack Burton is him being an outsider wherever he goes. And yeah, I would take Jack out of San Francisco, take him up into Canada, and dealing with indigenous peoples, and putting him again as the outsider trying to understand a culture he doesn't understand, and trying to be the white savior, but really just tagging along on somebody else's coattails, because that's what makes Jack brilliant. So yeah, that's the other one. So the Rocketeer is one, and then Big Trouble is 1A.
Okay. I've fairly recently, a couple of months ago, reread The Rocketeer, and I'm so glad you said that, Steve, because there is this conception of the cheesecake cheesecake factor. But if you look at the page count of Betty in those positions and things like that, I mean, it's very low, and when you get to the New York Adventure, it basically stops. So I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad somebody said that, because I've always felt too that that's a misinterpretation of that work. And maybe, is there any way you can do like a Commando Cody and just do it and not do it?
Well, yeah, Dave did that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That would be kind of appropriate, right?
Yeah. All right. Let me throw it over to Brian. Brian, anything else you have for Steve?
I guess let's go back to Max Rex. You're writing about this post-apocalyptic world in the middle of what many people thought was a very apocalyptic time. Did you find that quarantine or any of the current, besides the political, obviously that's definitely there, but did you find anything else intruding into that headspace? And did you start to go, gosh, this is what we thought the apocalypse was going to be like, but it's really actually a lot more mundane and boring?
No, the only thing that really intruded on it was, again, I'm never as fast or efficient as I want to be. And, you know, like when my mom started to get sick, there's a big gap between the last two installments of the strip. And yeah, it's just, I'm too damn slow. That's really what it comes down to. But, you know, I don't want to say that the quarantine didn't affect me, because it obviously has. But, you know, my partner and I are great together. She's really supportive, and we enjoy one another's company. So that all really helps. And, you know, I'm in central Illinois. So I'm fortunate that there's enough space to where I can walk. I can have a mask in my pocket, but 9 times out of 10, I'm not even going to run into anybody. And when I do, you know, we kind of go separate sides of the street and acknowledge and wave, and it's not.
That's good.
Excuse me, like a dense population. So, I didn't get it as bad as other people did. I have friends that are single and, you know, haven't seen anybody for you know, a year, and I can't imagine. And I mean, you know, before this started, I figured I was pretty much Burgess Meredith in that All the Time in the World episode of the Twilight Zone. But I don't think I could have handled it alone.
Yeah, I same thing. I have friends that just today even had conversations with people who are by themselves, and it's a whole other thing. You do some really good posts on your blog for writers and artists about like process and motivation, and I really wanted to thank you for that, because I feel like a lot of times writers get a little too in their head about inspiration. I know the one I just read before we started. So, you know, when you're teaching or when you're giving advice to up and coming writers, like what's the best one thing you can tell them as far as like, you know, being a productive, you know, keeping on it? Like what do you tell them? How do you encourage them?
Well, it's funny. I still don't think of myself as a writer. I think of myself as an artist who writes. So I don't know that I'm necessarily qualified to give advice to writers,
or to be creative, like in any way.
And so in broader creative terms, really the big thing, and what I love about the program that I'm, you know, at ISU right now, is it puts the lie to the whole idea of creative inspiration, and that it's really just about sitting down and doing the work. And as an extension of that, I think one of the worst things that any creative can do is letting imposter syndrome kind of eat away at you, and feeling like you're not ready or you're not good enough to do A, B, or C. And I'm going to wait until I'm ready. I'm going to wait until I'm good enough, because you're never going to feel that way. You're never going to feel ready. So you might as well jump in, get a little bruised, pick yourself up, and realize it's not as scary as you think. And that's been like the lesson that I've learned over and over and over again with, you know, when I was working at a role-playing game company, and I wasn't ready to draw comic samples yet. I wasted 10 years waiting to be ready, and I was never ready. And then when I started doing comics, I didn't know that I'd be able to write, and maybe one day I'll be ready. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, I'm repeating the same pattern, and I should just sit down and start writing. So yeah, that's just it, is you're never going to feel ready. So just do it.
That's great. I'm glad you're saying that, because it's one of those things you hear, but I think you're a success. I mean, you are doing some great work that is fully funded, or your Kickstarter is wildly successful. You've been wildly successful. Like, this is what our younger and or up and coming creatives need to hear.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I just don't wait till you're 55 to figure it out. You know, that's me.
And this is a perfect coda to end the interview on. So, Steve, thank you so much. And, personally, I love your work. And, I own Steed and Mrs. Peel page, and I own an Athena Voltaire page. You're the only creator I have more than one original page from. And, even things like the Kickstarter for my own comic book, I basically modeled the pitch video on yours more than anything else. So you've affected me in a lot of different ways. So, please, anything you have coming up, please come on the show to talk about. And also hoping that you can stick around as we talk about a couple of current comics for the remainder of the time that we have.
Please. And thank you so much for the kind words. I suck at taking compliments, so I'll just
Well, too bad. All right. All right. Well, we're going to head over virtually and aesthetically to the spinner rack. I'm going to start with Steve, who's always my good luck charm on this. So, Steve, tell us about a book that's current that you're reading that you're digging.
So it's got a lot of hype over the past, I'd say, a couple of months as they were leading up to it. It's part of a big initiative at Image. They're really pushing, a new slate of superhero books, and this is going to be sort of the first step towards that new slate of superhero books. And it is Radiant Black, #1, just released last week. Again, a lot of places, because of the hype, it sold out in the first printing. It's already gone to a second printing. I'm sure it'll get a third printing. And it's written by Kyle Higgins, who you might remember from Nightwing. He wrote Nightwing for DC for a couple of years. Also has done several Power Rangers books. And that's kind of where some of the, I would say probably a lot of the inspiration for maybe the look of Radiant Black, but then also sort of, maybe the feel of Radiant Black comes in as a sort of the next step or a more adult Power Rangers kind of feel to it, even though it is just so far just one person. But what really struck me about this book, and again, Marcelo Costa and Becca Carey do a beautiful job on the art, the colors, the action pages, things like that, just beautifully done. But the more interesting thing about this for me is who the main character is in this. The main character, and we've just been talking about the idea of writing and how important it is to keep at it and not wait around. This starts off with a main character who has moved out to LA to try and make it big writing, and unfortunately just hasn't really found his voice yet. He's written some short stories, has been working on a novel for 10 years, and it just isn't coming out. And so he goes back home to Illinois, feeling like he's failed. He's in debt. He's moving back in with his parents. It's just not going the way that he wants. So he takes a night out on the town with a good friend of his that he's known all of his life, who basically tries to punch him out of it, to just kind of, realize that, hey, just because you don't feel you're a success doesn't mean that there isn't a success in you that's able to come out. And then, of course, then the superhero sci-fi kicks into high gear with his discovery of what looks to be a floating black hole with an event horizon that he grabs onto, and it gives him powers and a suit and all that cool stuff that, we love in superhero comics. So, but the fact that Kyle Higgins kind of, also takes place in Rockford, Illinois, where Kyle Higgins apparently is from. So there's a little bit, of some autobiographical, bits thrown in there. But it's a lot of fun. It was a lot more fun. Sometimes when a book is super hyped, I try not to have high expectations just in case, because sometimes the hype doesn't really go anywhere. And in this one, like paring back my expectations, I really enjoyed it. It's a cool looking book. The characters are fun to read, and I'm really interested into what lies in store. So, Radiant Black #1, Kyle Higgins, Marcella Costa, and Becky Carey for the art duties, coming out from Image Comics.
All right, cool. I'm also very familiar with Kyle Higgins from Cowl.
Yep. Oh, Cowl.
Yeah, number
I
years
can't believe
ago.
I forgot that. Cowl.
And
I've loved Cowl. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Chicagoisms. I remember him telling me there's no way that Dick Grayson would ever go to a White Sox game. I do like that he throws in those real life nuggets. I have that in the next box, so looking forward to that. You said about the expansion though. Is the Spawn expansion part of this that was announced today? Do you know? Or
I don't know. I think because it's interesting because the way that they've been kind of talking about this or talking around this is like Image hasn't done superheroes before and hasn't had a vast array of superheroes and connected universes already. There have been the different studios themselves, like the Wildstorm Studio, Homage Studios, like these were interconnected superhero
from the get-go too.
From
the get-go
they're it's there. So maybe it's just maybe it's kind of a feel that they want to get back to the roots a little bit by really kind of pushing this a little bit further. I don't know if Spawn would be part of that because that is kind of the old guard, so maybe they're looking to shake things up and do a little bit more new blood.
All right, cool. We'll go over to the other Steve, what's something current that you're reading that you're digging?
I finally got caught on Birthright from John Williamson, and I'm going to mispronounce it. I know I am. Is it Andre or Andrea? Bresson or Bresson? Yeah, I'm a boob, but I'm really excited because I'm caught up, and they're heading into the final story arc, and I really didn't know what to expect when I started reading it, 8 or 9 trades ago. But each volume has been full of surprises and, really solid emotional beats and just beautiful, beautiful draftsmanship. So I'm really, really enjoying that and looking forward to the end game and seeing how they tie it all up. Awesome.
All right, over to Brian. Brian, tell us about something you're reading that you're digging, and I know what it is.
So I'm the worst comic book fan these days. I read so infrequently, and it's only because my life is insane. But I finally got caught up. Well, I mean, I wasn't super far behind, but on Marvel's King in Black, which I want to talk about because this last issue, I believe issue 4, it touches on a thing I didn't remember. And then as I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, oh, wait, yes. Okay, yes, I do remember all that. Is anybody else reading this here?
No.
Okay. Here. So it's a big event. Marvel events are hit or miss. Sometimes they're really interesting and can be executed well. Other times, not so much. But so Donny Cates, who has pretty much made a really good name for himself. I've really loved his Thor work and some of his other books prior. The Cosmic Ghost Rider was a lot of fun. He's fun. He's a good balance between a writer who gets into the deep cuts of Marvel history, but has fun with it, and it really likes to play with the toys, and that's cool. And that's kind of where this is going. So King in Black, if you're not familiar, because I don't think we've talked a lot about it, it's sort of this what happens if Venom, but not Venom himself, but like the proto Venom, this god of darkness, Null, takes over the earth, right? And it just consumes with all the venom goo and all the venomy stuff, and carnage too, of course. It takes over heroes and just the classic, like the earth is ending. Yeah. Final crisis or crisis, whatever. Same idea, same DC, same thing, right? But they really do a good job of focusing it around the son of Eddie Brock, who is Venom, of course. And this idea that was set up, I guess, previously that I didn't read, that he's sort of like latently the anti-Null, the anti-like God of Darkness. He's got something in him that's, I don't want to call it the anti-Venom because I feel like that's just too on the nose, right? But you get the idea. So we get through some machinations of Null taking over, and of course, all these valiant attempts by the heroes, which that's the other cool thing is you get to see the X-Men who have been largely shunted off into Krakoa world, all of that stuff put kind of front and center as part of the shared continuity of Marvel. So that's good. I like seeing that in a positive way that doesn't get too into the weeds of what's going on there, but just classic X-Men coming to help out. But you get through all of that and, things aren't great. They kill Venom. Spoiler, right? They don't kill Venom, obviously, right? Eddie Brock's going to be okay. And they have the Silver Surfer come back. And that's the other thing. I love Donny Cates' Silver Surfer Black story that he did, like a limited series, because it kind of sets some of this up. It has Silver Surfer like tarnished and turned into this like dark Silver Surfer sort of thing, which is interesting visually. Sets up the Null thing. But in this last issue, there's this thing that comes back, the God of Light. And you're sitting there because, that's very Manichean, right? God of Dark, God of Light. We got to do that. But it's a thing from Marvel that I forgot. Do you guys, I'm sure you are more than I am, familiar with Captain Universe?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm hearing lots of yes.
Yeah.
They did.
But I think Steve may come from different points on this because I remember his introduction in the Micronauts. And then I imagine with Steve, you might be more in tune with what happened with him. Again, a bridge into later stuff was when Spider-Man briefly had his powers.
Yeah, Spider-Man,
and that may be
also
where
Quasar.
Yep.
Quasar played into that a lot in his series. And I think there was also something very recently with when they reintroduced a lot of the new universe stuff.
Okay.
Somehow I think Captain Universe.
Yeah, there was a female version within the Hickman mix.
So
with what was it with Infinity?
Infinity,
I
yes.
believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So I had lost the bubble on what the hell that was. The Enigma Force is the sort of latent.
The Enigma Force is in that. So do I have to start buying this because of the Micronauts?
The Micronauts are not there yet. However, this last issue is where they basically reveal the God of Light, who is sort of Null's antithesis, is the Enigma Force / Captain Universe.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You're welcome.
I really wanted to be free of this event. All right, keep going.
It's a deep cut into Marvel lore that, I'm a Marvel person. I've read Marvel forever. And I remember Quasar and, I remember Captain Universe popping up occasionally, like that whole thing. But it never was like it was never my thing. I never tracked it. I was always like, what the fuck? But yes, that's where we're going. It comes to bond with somebody. I won't say who. Spoilers, whatever. But it's the turning point in the story, and I guess it's not very many more issues. I guess it's a fairly quick event. I have not read the tie-ins. I listened to iFanboy recently, and they said that the Thunderbolts tie-in is excellent. So I'm kind of gonna probably go pick that up.
Yeah, I'd be interested in exploring the Submariner one, not just for Busiek, but how do you fit that character into something cosmic? I'm very interested.
It's very grounded though. That's the thing. I will say Donny Cates is an interesting writer because he plays with the big toys, but he keeps it grounded. And the death of the child whose name escapes me, who's Venom or Eddie's son, he's dealing with the apparent death of his father. So it's like all grounded and focused back on that very human, relatable story, but with this cosmic stakes thing. Silver Surfer, Jean Grey. They mix in all the stuff. It's the art by Ryan Stegman, and Stegman's got a really interesting style. It's not necessarily the one that I gravitate towards, but it's brilliantly executed. He's got great skill and a great art. I mean, he's very well thought of and just very dynamic. He's a very dynamic artist. It's an interesting palette to use in this story. I think sometimes the venominess gets a little murky, and that might be more in the inking side. It's just a lot of like there's all these symbiotes flowing around, and you're just like, what am I looking at? Yeah. So anyway, I will say this. I did not love the first few issues. I thought like it was kind of whatever. I don't know what's going on. But this issue, I think, definitely turned that page, and I'm more interested again now because of like what they're doing and where they're going. So if you're interested, I know a couple of people. We had Kristen down here. I missed the first comment there. Damn it, Brian! I've been ignoring King in Black too. Now I want to read it. Yeah, it's and I guess John read the Thunderbolts. So
yeah, John loves Thunderbolts.
I do too. So I'm excited to pick that up. Anyway, but yeah, King in Black number whatever, the newest one.
That's my favorite issue, the whatever one.
King in Black.
X-Men's been tied into that through Sword. So the last 2 issues of Sword have been King in Black tie-ins, very directly King in Black tie-ins, which is unfortunate because I kind of want them to stay separate. But that's just me. I'll let people have their giant line-wide crossovers.
It just started. Like Al didn't even get to tell his story before he got sucked into the event. So whatever.
Well, it was like X Factor and Cross of Swords too. Where it's just sort of like, oh, here's 2 issues about this cool concept. Never mind. It's all
Yep.
All right. Well, the DC dude here, he kept going with a month's worth of Future State, but I'm not going to talk about that. There's one good book.
It's very pretty. The spines, like the colors that are coming out. Pretty.
But the book that I wanted to talk about is from Terry Moore. And for some reason, this hasn't gotten a lot of publicity. But this is his next series called Serial. If you're familiar with the name Terry Moore, most likely is from Strangers in Paradise. He recently had another series called 5 Years, which grouped together the characters from Strangers in Paradise and his series Rachel Rising and Motor Girl, which you would have thought were just completely unconnected. And apparently there's a shared universe there. And Serial keeps going with this momentum. It features Zoe, who, let me see how I can describe this from Rachel Rising, is a 60-year-old, 10-year-old girl that was once possessed by a demon and became a serial killer. But that's a huge oversimplification. So when we find Zoe, she's living in a camper van, and it's in an area of the country that we don't exactly know where we're at yet. But the events start off with a young girl who is 16. I just want to get her name right. Oh, God, because it seems important. Kendall. And she is in the midst of a sexual assault by one of her father's friends. And doesn't end well for the father's friend. I'll leave spoilers there, but it doesn't end well. And as we go further into the story, it's obvious that this girl, Kendall, is not exactly Kendall. We're not exactly sure what the story is going forward with this apparent serial killer, which, like Dexter, may be on the side of angels in a sense. But that is what feels effectively like the preamble of the story. Then we see Zoe again, and again the art goes from Terry's usual style to this hyper cartoonish dream where Zoe gets to kill clowns and Bigfoot, and I don't know. I've never dreamt about killing Bigfoot, but it never looks like so much fun as it does here. And we find Zoe, the 10-year-old, driving the camper van that she sleeps in, heading off to a friend who has a connection to this Kendall character, and also the person who it didn't end well for. I'm doing a terrible job in summarizing this issue, but like a lot of Terry's work, if you read his stuff, the first, second, third, fourth issues take you in multiple directions, and then it's like the snow sets, and you see the bigger picture. So I big time recommend this. I reread it twice, just because I knew there were stuff that I may have misinterpreted the first time, or things that I didn't catch the first time. And hell, that was a lot of Rachel Rising. So that's my recommendation for this week: Serial by Terry Moore from his imprint, which is Abstract Studio. And this did sell enough to get to a second printing. So if it's out, it might be back in soon.
Two questions about that. The first is, do you have to have read Rachel Rising to enjoy Serial? Is it like that tied into the other series?
I think with how they present the character of Zoe, that you don't have to. They give you enough background information, and also Rachel Rising was not a series I finished. I do have to say that, but from what they give you in the issue, I don't think you have to read any of his previous work. And and a lot of his series are like that, particularly Motor Girl. You don't need to know any of the previous information, though there are bits of connective tissue between the series, and some of that was like effectively retcons too. But I don't think you would be at a disadvantage having not read 5 Years or Rachel Rising.
The second question: does Camper Van Beethoven make for good soundtrack in the background while she's trying? I'm actually, it may tie in very well in the dreamier sequences, because
I might go with Cracker if we're
if
we're using
evolve that, and you're in Cracker territory. Yes.
Always a music geek, so.
That's
there
why
we go. Yep. And I'm glad you did. Okay, by the time that it says here in the East Coast time, it's time to start wrapping up. And when we wrap up an episode of the Comic Book Bears, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. In the bear community, if you find a fellow attractive, you woof at them. And we do something similar. This is an opportunity for us to signify something which might be a comic book, but it also might be a film or a TV program or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may be interested in sampling. We'll be gracious first to our guest, Steve Bryant. What do you have as a potential woof of the week?
Grady Hendrix, the Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire Slaying. I just started it. I read his, I previously had read his book, My Best Friend's Exorcism. The high concept is described as Beaches meets The Exorcist set in the 80s.
Oh.
So, yeah. And it was
all of us,
everything I hoped it would be. And the Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire Slaying looks like it's going to be. I'm on this big pop culture horror kick where everything is kind of riffing on, the movies and TV stuff that we've all grown up with. And Hendrix seems to do it really well. So Grady Hendrix, that's my pick, my woof.
Awesome. All right, over to Steve. What's your woof of the week there, son?
Mine is a film that was just released this past week, I guess in movie theaters, and on demand, I believe, is on its way if it hasn't gotten there already. I'm not going to say how I saw it. But the film is called Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. And speaking of pop culture 80s, though a very different type of 80s, away from the horror, but in a very bizarre... I don't know how to describe this movie. This movie is almost indescribable. It's strange. It's kitschy. It's got Kristen Wiig and oh my god, I've forgotten her name, and I hate it. They wrote Bridesmaids together, and this is their follow-up to that. It's two, middle-aged women who are probably the most boring human beings on the face of the planet, but are just so fascinating to watch with their strange interests. And and aesthetic and everything, decide to go down to, the paradise that is the Florida Gulf Coast, to enjoy what's to be had at Vista Del Mar. And also at the same time, there is an evil supervillain who is seeking to murder everybody in Vista Del Mar with genetically modified mosquitoes with poison bites. And not even bites, stings. Just to be weird, because it's an insane movie. There are musical numbers. There are just random musical numbers. The Jamie Dornan from the 50 Shades of Grey films is the love interest for both women, and has a big musical number where he sings at seagulls. There's just no way to really truly give you the joy that is this. And there's also this entire running riff about a woman named Trish that they just improv, and it goes on and on and on, and there's callbacks, and it's an amazing thing. This is definitely the kind of movie that in 20 years people are going to be talking about, that this is what got them into comedy. So it is that. It is going to be an influential film, even if it's not as Annie Mamulo. Yes, thank you, Kristen. It is
our fact checkers.
Yes, thank you. So if you have not seen this movie, and it isn't for everybody, but I think for everybody here, you're probably going to love it.
Do there drag queens show up? Do we get drag queens?
They are in drag already. They're in 80s 47-year-old woman drag. There is no, it's Kristen Wiig. Wiig in a wig, and she's actually in 2 wigs because she also plays the supervillain too. There's just it's.
All right, you sold me already. Yes,
go see it. However you can see it, go see it.
All right, move over to Brian. Brian, what is your wolf of the week?
So I got to talk to the creators of this comic called Class 6 not too long ago on my Rainbow Spotlight series on Flame On. But they put out new issues, and this is from Craven Comics, Season 1, Issue 7, Fernando Velez, Doris Marcano, Daniel Grimaldi. I love what they're doing here. It's very subversive and sort of rewrites the history of the world, but in a way that mixes, lizard men from the center of the earth, drag queens, Jesus meeting a drag queen. We got President Obama, because it started anyway. It's a lot. There's a lot of things happening, but it's really fun. And if none of that interests you, I don't know what to tell you about this, but it's really a superhero book that tries to bring in different representation from the queer community and tell a epic story, as I alluded to. So if you're interested, Class 6 from Craven Comics, it's distributed, I think, directly through their website, which I'll find a link to. But their newest issue, like I said, just came out, and they get biblical. It's excellent. You got to check it out. Lucifer is involved. I mean, it's crazy. So
awesome. Well, my wolf of the week goes to a web series. This is a web series that has been around 11 years, but I've never watched it, which kind of amazes me given the subject. And that is the web series What's in My Bag, which comes out from Amoeba Records. Amoeba Records has locations in San Francisco, and they closed Los Angeles, but they're opening a new location, which looks amazing. And What's in My Bag has mostly musicians, but also some other personalities shop in the store and then go through what they bought in their bag. And, it ranges from musicians from Steve Earle to Duran Duran to Tune Yards. You also have other types of personalities like Michael Shannon, Trixie Mattel, as a little trip through the store. And, seeing some of the choices that people pull out, it's very satisfying when somebody goes against your expectations. There's a classical organist, Cameron Carpenter, that my partner is a big favorite of, and some of his choices just blew my mind. Episodes are very quick. They're like 10 to 15 minutes. At least for someone like me who's so musically minded, it was a huge rabbit hole to go down. Like before I knew it, 3 hours worth of episodes I had in the bag there. So it's a web series. The episodes are on Amoeba's YouTube channel, and it's called What's in My Bag. So that's my wolf of the week. All right, we're going to wrap this one up in a bow. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. In terms of points of contact on the interwebs, where can people go in relation to your work?
Thank you for having me. And yeah, the Twitter, Steve Bryant Art, and that's where I am on Facebook as well, Steve Bryant Art, and my much neglected Instagram is Steve Bryant Art as well. Someday I'll get back there, I promise.
Right. And we're recording on the 18th. How many days left for the Kickstarter?
It ends on the 25th, I believe, at 12:38 p.m. Central Time.
Awesome.
Not that I've been, staring at it with a book on, but I may have.
And you have been listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears podcast. If you want to listen to us, please do so by downloading us through iTunes, listening to us through Stitcher Radio, or catching us on some of the other podcatching platforms. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. So until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And we'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.